From the European Parliament here in Brussels, this is Raw Politics. Thank you for joining us tonight. And on the programme, escape route as MPs debate the deal. A top EU law officer says the UK could change its mind on Brexit unilaterally. Borderline Brexit. We hit the English border in a special report to talk to people about their hopes and fears after the UK leaves. Macron caves. The French president buckles under pressure from the yellow vests and suspends a fuel tax hike. Sports sexism. Outrage after the woman celebrated as the world's best footballer is asked if she can twerk at the awards. And acting like children. The Swedish team taking the adult politicians to task at the COP24 summit in Poland. It is time to meet our panel for this evening. I'm joined by Andrew Byrne, EU correspondent at the Sunday Times. Andrew, which of these stories do you like?
I'm keeping an eye on the Macron story. After 3 weeks of mayhem and violent protests, he's finally conceded. But I think the big question is, will this be enough to actually defuse the protests, or is just the beginning of more trouble?
The big question indeed. All right, joining us as well is Jacqueline Foster, British MEP and Deputy Leader of the Conservative MEPs. Jacqueline, which of these stories are you watching closely?
Well, I've been watching the debate in the House of Commons on the motion for contempt of Parliament, and obviously we're then looking forward to moving on to the discussions on the withdrawal bill.
Lots of discussion coming your way on that topic. And also joining us, Alan Smith, a Scottish National Party MEP from Scotland and one of the MEPs behind the ECJ case on revoking Article 50. Alan, which of the stories are you watching?
Unsurprisingly, I'm watching my own court case.
Yes.
It's been a great effort. There's been Greens, Labour, SNP as well, from the Scottish, the Westminster and the European Parliament, working together, putting the badges to one side to actually empower the UK Parliament to find out the terms of revocation of Article 50, which will empower the MPs in the discussions ahead.
All right, and that is actually exactly where we will be beginning tonight, the legal right to change one's mind. According to a top European law officer, the UK should have just done that when it comes to Brexit, the option to cancel its withdrawal from the bloc unilaterally. So the legal opinion comes just as the UK Parliament begins 5 days of debate over the Brexit deal. And our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, he is in Luxembourg right now outside the European Court of Justice. Darren, so tell us just how did we get here and what does it mean really?
Well, I think with Brexit and Article 50, Tessa, it's thrown up a whole load of political, social and legal questions, hasn't it, really? Something we've been grappling with over the last 2 years or so. On the legal front, when you look at Article 50, the assumption had been made that essentially if the member country that enacted it wanted it to stop, well, they would need then the consent of the other EU nations, all the rest of the 27 of them. However, as you rightly said, some Scottish politicians have taken that to court, somewhat frustrated with the UK court system. They took it to the European Court of Justice. Now, we heard the arguments last week. Essentially, the UK government and the European Council and Commission on the same side in this argument. They did not want the UK to be able to unilaterally withdraw from Article 50. The UK government's point of view was that this was simply a hypothetical question, that as a government, Tessa, they had no intention of withdrawing Article 50. For the European side, they made the argument that this would just lead to endless uncertainty, that the other countries may well take advantage of it. What would stop Hungary and Poland, for example, triggering Article 50 and then trying to win some concessions from the European Union before stopping the process. But the Advocate General today sided with those campaigners, suggesting that the UK government could, in his advice, end Article 50. In a sense, it could end Brexit if it so wanted.
It could. So, Darren, what does that mean for the March 29th deadline?
Well, there are a few caveats to this. First of all, on the legal front, this is simply advice. It is not the actual judgment of the ECJ. That is still to come, though, of course, they do tend to take the advice of the Advocate General. Also, in addition to this, he made clear that it would have to be done in a vote in the House of Commons. The government itself could not do it. And also that it would have to be done in good faith, that essentially this could not be used as a ploy in some regards simply to get further concessions. They would really want to actually end the process on its merits. How it plays out is really difficult to predict, Tessa. Merely at the moment is slightly academic because, of course, as the UK government has stated, it is not the will of Britain at the moment to end Article 50. For many Remainers, they will see this as a good decision. It means that, in effect, for example, if there was a second referendum that Britain voted to stay inside the European Union, they could decide unilaterally to remain inside the EU on the terms, the current membership terms, many would say the good membership terms that Britain currently has. But I would also suggest that potentially this is not necessarily a bad decision for the British Prime Minister, for Theresa May. She may well play on this fact that it is possibly her deal or no Brexit. And I think she will use this as a little bit of leverage with Brexiteers leading up to that vote next Tuesday to suggest that there is a growing chance that Brexit may be halted, may be stopped altogether, and that if they really want Brexit, her deal may be the only way forwards.
All right, thank you for that, Darren McCaffrey, our political editor. All right, I'll start with you, Alan. You must be happy. This decision coming there. Why did you pursue this, and were you expecting this?
Well, we were expecting to have clarification on how to revoke Article 50. Now, the lawyers can argue this to the sun sets, but the basic thing that we've had from the Advocate General today, now, Darren's right, it's not the final question, it's not the final answer, but it is clear that the UK government can change its mind on this. Triggering Article 50 was done by sending a letter. We can do broadly the same after a decision's been made domestically to revoke it as well. So that really empowers the MPs as we're going forward having the discussion that we're getting, because it's clear that the UK Parliament is being faced with an utterly false choice. Mrs May's deal is a bad deal, or chaos is not the only option.
Jacqueline was shaking her head as you were speaking. Jacqueline, please do
Well,
jump
the
in.
thing is, I fully respect colleagues who never wanted to leave the European Union, and I think that's an honourable position to take. But the fact of the matter is that the House of Commons has already voted overwhelmingly to invoke Article 50, and this is going back to, I think, 494 votes to 122. And this received royal assent on the 26th of June, 2018. So, yes, whatever happens in the future, other countries may wish to leave or join the EU, I have no idea. But this changes nothing, and the only thing I can see it is more of a stalling tactic. I wish to leave, along with the majority of the public, on the 29th of March next year. We have a deal on the table, and I think it behoves everyone now to get behind the Prime Minister and support that deal.
So if this changes nothing, is it really just for Remainers to know that this option exists and they could pursue it if they should want to eventually? Is that what it is? Because it doesn't change anything.
I mean, I'm not sure we can say it changes nothing, because the process with Brexit right now is so uncertain that opinions like this, and let's remember that this opinion was not expected to come so quickly, and in fact the British government never wanted this case to be accepted in the first place. But how this affects the judgment of MPs in the House of Commons could be quite significant. And I tend to think one of the unlikely beneficiaries of this opinion and the judgment, if it follows it, is Theresa May herself, because I think she can use this to say to her MPs, if you defer this choice, if you don't approve my deal, the risk of the whole thing going off and being cancelled is actually not insignificant.
But then Brexiteers are going to say, well, this is going against, what has been the democratic choice of
We have had a referendum, and it was a legally binding referendum. It was a people's vote. It was the highest recorded vote in our history. And I just wish that people would come behind that. They have different points of view. People vote for all sorts of different reasons. But we need to move this forward for business, for industry, for the constituents, because we need certainty now, and we need to be able to plan ahead.
Well, I'll correct a factual inaccuracy on that. It wasn't a legally binding vote. It was an advisory referendum, which was rejected by Northern Ireland and rejected by Scotland. To call Mrs May's package a deal is actually to misrepresent this. I'm a lawyer myself. If you're entering into a contract, you need to have detail about the future. All Mrs May's delivering is exit and then who knows what. This is not going to deliver any clarity for business, for our society, or for anybody else, and it needs to be rejected.
But I think what's also interesting is that this does set a precedent, and it's what kind of precedent is it, moving forward for the EU? Really very interesting to watch. All right. Now, as politicians debate the Brexit deal in advance of next week's critical vote, we decided to get away from Westminster to find out what people in the UK are saying exactly and feeling less than 4 months to go until that Brexit deadline. So we sent our correspondent Brian Carter to the communities along the English border. First up, Wales. Brian travelled from Brussels to Chester on the UK side and shot in across the Welsh border. Here's what he discovered.
For the last 2 years, Brexit has been at the centre of European politics. For people from outside the UK like me, looking in, the whole thing seems quite confusing, messy, almost like a mistake. But do the people here feel the same? I've come to the border between England on the one hand and Wales on the other to talk to people to hear what they really think about Brexit. It was time to hit the road and head to the nearest town. So we're now driving around Chester. This is a city of about 100,000 people, very close to the border with Wales. In 2016, they voted to leave the EU, but by a very thin margin. It was only 50.7% of the people here who voted to leave against the rest who voted to remain. So we're trying to find people from both sides. There may not be much festive cheer in Westminster right now, but that hasn't dampened spirits at Chester's traditional Christmas market. Stall owner Jackie voted leave 2 years ago and still passionately believes it was the right choice. So you voted to leave?
Yes.
The EU?
Yes.
Why?
Because I don't like the politics, I don't like the unelected people telling us what we can and can't do, who we can trade with, who we can't trade with, how much money we're just giving them money after money after money, and it seems like, to me, we're not getting what we pay for.
The chef working next to Jackie doesn't regret voting for Brexit either. You still think that was the right choice?
Well, a lot of the British public believe it was, because otherwise they wouldn't have voted to leave. So yeah, I'll go for that.
So you have no regret?
No. I think it'll grow the economy.
That's not what the Bank of England says. They say that the economy will be worse off.
Well, they do the scaremonger.
So far, all the people I spoke to all seem to be in favor of Brexit. They don't really care about what's going to happen in Westminster next week. And they all seem to believe that the UK will be better off after it leaves the EU. But I'm still going to try to find somebody who's in favor of remaining within the EU. I set up for a place where people practiced a hobby I had rarely heard of, and where I was told I could find remainers. That's right, line dancing. It might not catch on across the channel, but they seemed happy to answer my questions. If you don't mind me asking, can I ask all of you here to raise your hand if you voted in favor of Brexit? And amongst those who lifted their hands, who still believes it was the right choice? So you voted to remain, but you respect the people's choice of leaving.
Yes.
Despite how the negotiations went, despite everything that happened.
Yes.
Do you think it's a good deal?
No, but we've got no options. We have to just go with it.
For these line dancers, no matter how hard Brexit has been, no one I spoke to had changed their minds. The EU-UK divorce has obviously divided Britain along many lines, and it's the younger generations like swimming instructor Charlotte who have the deepest concerns about what the future might hold.
Obviously the import rates won't be very good, loss of jobs and unemployment rates will skyrocket, trading won't happen, and I just don't think that there's a lot of positives that will come out of it other than we're just going to be a standalone country.
Wales, like England, voted to leave the EU. Continuing my trip along the border, I wanted to know if Welsh voters felt Brexit was heading in the right direction. As the night drew in, disagreeing on Brexit over a pint still seemed to be a national pastime on both sides of the border.
That was the big thing, was immigration. Not that I'm anti-immigrants or anything like that, but I just thought there was just too many. And it was driving down wages and making people in this country poorer, so I believed in it. And now, Theresa May, she's got this deal, and it's a halfway house.
Well, now as people are beginning to think, well, hang on, what else was we told? What was going to... The NHS was going to get another 300 million a week? Rubbish. Never happened. Never happened, never will.
The Brexiteers around this table now seem to accept that there will be a short-term economic hit, but they maintain Brexit is still the right decision in the long run.
I think it's going to be hard to start with, but I think eventually...
I think for the next 2 years, once we're out, for the next couple of years, it's going to be really hard. But then I think we'll gather our wits and we'll be able to do, just as we were before we went in the European Union.
Brexiteers and Remainers across the UK have failed to build much common ground in the 2 years since the referendum, except for a feeling that the Brexit deal on the table is not the one they wanted. Brian Carter for Euronews.
All right, Jacqueline, I'll go to you because you represent the Northwest region and where Brian, close to where Brian was. Is this what people are feeling? Just get on with it, that they're sick of it?
Yeah, the Northwest as a region were one of the most Eurosceptical regions, and they voted to leave. You will have a difference in the cities, the same as London as a city that voted to remain. But other to that, as you, I think, saw from the piece, most people hadn't really changed their mind. I think to reassure people when they're asked the question, one of the key issues on this was bringing in the transition period, because we are unravelling 45 years of legislation and treaties and all sorts of things. And I think it's that reassurance and trying to make sure we get the message out that it's straightforward.
We just want very, very quickly, Alan, I'll ask you, because if people hadn't changed their minds, what's the point really? Because even if you have the option now, it's still 50-50. You're not going to get any clear answer.
Well, that's not
just
true. And there was nobody in your package under the age of 60, from what I could see, other than the lady who was actually in favour of Remain. So we have seen movement. I'm not sure that was entirely representative of the person
But it's still a split, you know. It's
well, I think I know my region pretty well, actually.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, today it is the first day of a 5-day debate in the House of Commons over the Brexit deal, and it comes amid a contempt of Parliament challenge. And for more on this, our correspondent Vincent McAviney joins us now from London. Vincent, what can we expect from these marathon debate sessions? And, you know, how does the contempt of challenge fit in all of this?
Good evening, Tessa. Well, as a general rule of thumb in British politics, you can tell how badly things are going for a government by the number of tents that are here outside of Parliament. There's many more out of shot just here. And that's because Theresa May has yet more headaches. Now, they were meant to start these 5 days of 8-hour-long debates on the withdrawal agreement. That's meant to be voted on next Tuesday, that substantive vote. At the moment, it's still looking like the Prime Minister doesn't have enough votes to carry that through. But then, late last night, there was the acceptance by the Speaker in the House of Commons, John Bercow, that there was grounds for a possible accusation of contempt of Parliament. That's because MPs voted to see the legal advice. The Attorney General went yesterday to Parliament and gave them an overview, but said it wouldn't be published in full because, like you or I going to a lawyer, the government has attorney-client privilege. That information is meant to be confidential to help ministers make their decisions. So the government is arguing on 2 points at the moment: the principle of confidentiality of legal advice and the advice itself needing to stay behind closed doors. So because MPs brought that motion last night, they're now having a 3-hour debate in the House of Commons, which has delayed the Brexit debate, and they are arguing through the points. So all of the opposition parties are united in this. Sir Keir Starmer, who is the Labour Shadow Brexit Secretary, he's a former barrister and Director of Public Prosecutions, he stood up and opened the debate with a strong argument saying that this was in contempt of Parliament, that they needed to now publish that legal advice. But the government is responding. Andrea Leadsom saying that the Attorney General showed utter respect to Parliament. He wasn't in contempt, which can hold quite a severe penalty. It can mean someone being temporarily suspended from the House of Commons or even permanently removed. She was saying that basically this principle has to stay, that legal advice for the government must be confidential because otherwise it could threaten national security. To give you an example, back in the history books, not even the legal advice on the 2003 Iraq War was published. So the government is fighting pretty much on this principle. But like with everything to do with Brexit, all of the sides are messed up. It's like a Rubik's Cube where all the colours and positions are out of alignment because you've got cross-party members supporting the opposition parties in there on this, but also Jacob Rees-Mogg from the Brexiteers standing up and also saying that it's important that MPs get to see this legal advice because they're all worried about the backstop, the UK possibly being trapped in a customs union arrangement after the transition period. So, and yet another headache on top of all of this, Dominic Grieve, who's the former Attorney General, has just laid an amendment that will be voted on tonight, which would see if the vote is defeated twice on May's withdrawal bill, it would actually be on the second vote for MPs to determine the direction and decide what would then happen. So a lot of headaches here for Prime Minister Theresa May.
Indeed, and that continues. Thank you very much, Vincent McAviney, our correspondent there. All right, Andrew, I mean, as Vincent has pointed out, there have been legal advice in the past, and you know it hasn't been a subject of whether it should be revealed or not. Why now? And they get legal advice all the time about the EU.
All the time, and of course the general principle the government is relying on here is that, like any attorney-client relationship, there should be privacy. I think Theresa May's big fear is that by showing the government's hand in essentially, or what advice it's been given, it might on the one hand reveal all of the painful compromises that may have been made, the sort of difficult, ambivalent nature of some of the aspects around the backstop in particular. But I think the one to watch, I think, is more interesting is the second amendment in Vincent's piece there, the Grieve amendment, because if that goes through, and it's possible it could go through, it gives a Parliament a much stronger hand in determining what comes next if the vote is rejected next week, and that weakens the government's hands to give the Parliament much more of a say over what Theresa May would do next.
So because there's a lot of talk about this contempt of Parliament, I mean, what does it mean? Is it really a big danger for Theresa May, or is this just a chess game that we're playing now? All right.
If I can just come in, I don't believe there has been contempt.
Okay.
If the Attorney General had chosen not to attend the House of Commons yesterday and spent 2.5 hours debating and answering questions and sort of not answering questions, but even going as far as saying to individual members, I will write to you with further detail if that is what is required, then maybe you could understand if people are upset about that. But when you have the protocols that have been laid down, not just under... The advice isn't party political. Advice is to governments has to be non-party political because it is a very difficult decision when governments are making decisions for the future of the country.
Just very quickly, Alan, yes or no that it should be made public?
Yes. This is too important.
Okay, well, there you go. All right, we will be watching that closely. But now, as the government scrambled to respond to the contempt motion, a Tory minister delivered an impressive filibuster with thanks to some Scottish inventions. Let's take a look.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. I mean, the history of invention from Scotland almost beggars belief. You can go had one nearby on a steam engine, knowing that it had been invented by James Watt. You can speak on a telephone, invented by Alexander Graham Bell. And if you're ill, it is Mr. Fleming's penicillin, which could probably save you. Despite my ageing looks, I can assure my honourable friend that I was not there at the time of the invention of the steam engine, but I'm sure there will be future inventions which coincide with my lifetime. My right honourable friend, who is the greatest drummer in the House of Commons, I seem to have got second wind, and
Would you give way?
most certainly. I give way first.
Could I advise my right honourable friend they produce tablets for that now as well?
No doubt, invented and made in a laboratory in Scotland.
Well, we do have a proud Scotsman here. Invented everything.
Well, he's right in that as far as that goes, but forgive me a sense of humour failure on this. What we've just seen there is an example of how broken the British democracy actually is. And at a time of national crisis, as we're facing all the issues that we're facing, climate change, the refugee crisis, the financial crisis, they're all still real things. We're being distracted with Brexit, which is utterly self-inflicted, and even from that, there's a spectacle of over-promoted posh boys having some clever debating society nonsense.
Filibustering.
May I just come in and say, if they hadn't have had so many stalling tactics to take Brexit through, maybe there'd be more time to discuss other important issues.
Well, there you go. On that note, we will take a short break. It's coming up on Raw Politics, what not to ask the best female footballer in the world. We'll tell you about the apology and outrage after a twerking question at the Ballon d'Or. Plus, President Emmanuel Macron backs down after weeks of fuel tax protests that swelled into anti-Macron demonstrations. The French government announced it is suspending the introduction of its fuel tax. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. After standing firm during 3 weeks of unrest, the French government finally backed down today. It announced that it is suspending a proposed fuel tax hike that sparked the so-called Yellow Vest movement. And this resulted in 3 deaths and hundreds of arrests. And here is what the French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe had to say today.
Après avoir entendu cette demande exprimée par à peu près tous les interlocuteurs que j'ai rencontrés au cours des consultations de ces derniers jours, je suspends pour une durée de 6 mois, ces mesures fiscales. Elles ne s'appliqueront pas avant d'être débattues par toutes les parties prenantes. Nous voulons, dans ce laps de temps, identifier et mettre en œuvre des mesures d'accompagnement justes et efficaces.
Well, we've seen a lot of images from Paris, but the city of Lille has also seen massive protests, and that is where we find our Euronews correspondent, Annelise Borges, tonight. Annelise, you have talked to a lot of protesters. What is their reaction to this latest government announcement?
I've been speaking to representatives of the Yellow Vests movement for the past few hours. I'm here in Lille, the north of France, to talk to them and to get their reaction. And those I spoke to told me that it's too little, too late. What the government of Emmanuel Macron is offering them changes absolutely nothing. They say the fact that the government is actually suspending this tax hike and not dropping that completely is a trap. They say they no longer trust the administration of Emmanuel Macron. They once again, I have heard again and again today that he is the président des riches, the president of the rich. He is not governing for the majority here in this country. And they say they are more determined than ever. They will continue taking to the streets. They will continue conducting their actions across the country and are calling on the French people to make provisions of food and medicine, and are calling on a nationwide blockade starting on December the 10th.
Yeah, if you're saying they think that this is too little, too late, do you think this decision will be enough to put a lid on the movement at all?
Well, that is a very good question. That is certainly what the government was hoping for. The fact that the Prime Minister has come out and confirmed this significant concession. It is significant because, of course, this is a government that until now has been insisting that it was its way or the highway. They would not change course. They would insist on these reforms. They were going to push through no matter the consequences. Now we see the government giving in to the power of the streets, at least slightly. They wanted, of course, a significant reaction from the Yellow Vests. Edouard Philippe, once again, this morning talked about hearing the anger in the streets and seeing the anger in the streets of France and wanting for people to know that he was going to do something about it. Now, the Prime Minister also said that now that these concessions have been made, he's calling on the Yellow Vests to talk to the government. He's calling on dialogue, and he has insisted that those who want to continue to demonstrate must do so calmly and peacefully.
All right, thank you for that, Annelise Borges, a correspondent, talking to us from Lille there. And joining me in the studio to discuss this in more detail is Spanish MEP Florent Marcelici, who has participated in the Spanish grassroots movements, the Los Indignados, and we also have Dharmendra Kanani, Director of Strategy at Friends of Europe. And still with me is Andrew Byrne, EU correspondent at the Sunday Times. All right, I'll begin with the too little, too late. Dharmendra, do you think it is too little, too late?
I think there's something wrong about the discourse, about this notion of referring it to as a U-turn or a little too late. I think the yellow movement, the yellow jacket movement, which actually see a sense of power and opportunity here, and actually see that something has been listened to and heard, and actually how do you make more of that opportunity? I think the reportage of either seeing it as too little or a U-turn takes away from, I think, an opportunity to have a genuine dialogue between president and community and citizen. And I think one of the failings of today is that actually Macron didn't actually come out and speak himself. He should have.
Yeah.
I think that he needs to get back in touch with his central message.
To point out, there were some elements of the movement who did not actually want to have a dialogue. You know, there were some that did and some that didn't.
No,
there
indeed,
was
that might be the case, but actually here's an opportunity. You've got a groundswell of a community actually taking to the streets across political spectrum. Here's an opportunity for him to say, my kind of government is a different government. I want to reach out to you and discuss with you how we can make this better. Okay, a 6-month suspension is one case. People read all sorts of cynicism into it, but take the opportunity and carve a different politic out of it, rather than going back in history and saying it's a little too late, it's a U-turn, or he's not getting what he wants.
Yeah, the fact that he didn't talk to them, that actually did.
But I think he needs to be able to learn and go back to basics and actually say, this is the kind of mandate I want. I want to engage with you seriously about this. Use the opportunity of that groundswell of opinion to actually try and discuss how you do this, where actually his tax system is unfortunately affecting the poorest and benefiting the richest.
So that's the opportunity from the government side. But Florent, you have been involved in grassroots movements. You know, you have your political involvement. What happens when there is no figure it? As we see here, it's really grassroots. Can it fizzle out and in the end not change anything?
Well, I think that can change a lot of things, and I don't know exactly if this movement will change something on the short term. But as the indignados, for example, the indignados didn't change anything on the short term. They changed all the political spectrum in Spain, for example, because we can't understand Podemos, for example, without understand indignados, and they came 3 years after the indignados. So maybe you.
But then Podemos lost power. But it's another story.
Yeah, that's another story. But still, you have a party right now with 50% of the votes in Spain coming from this movement. Right. So when you change the social culture, when you change the social hegemony, you change something in the country. So something has changed in France. We don't know what exactly. We don't know how exactly it will end at the end, but something has changed. And there is something very similar to the indignados, just something very similar, that's the trust. There is no trust in politics. There is no trust in the head of the state in that case. And that's why what you said, you're totally right. Macron should have given the face and said, hey, here I am, I'll listen to you because there is no trust between you and me. Yeah, let's go back to that.
But at the same time, I just want to point out, this is not the first time France has seen massive protests. And in fact, that is a problem in France, as some would say. There is no change.
Well,
it can't change.
I mean, we have seen a suspension for 6 months of this policy, but the problem is that Macron has set his face entirely against a sort of a democratic face-to-face encounter with these protesters. He sent his prime minister out today, and the strategy he's doing now is about trying to sort of peel off moderate supporters from a harder core by saying, I'm conceding on these small points. It's hard to see how it will work. It just won't be enough. The demands of these protesters are more than just a fuel tax. They want the reintroduction of a wealth tax. There's many more widespread grievances, as you've pointed out. And even if he wanted to engage or was willing to engage and demonstrate humility and engage the protesters, who does he speak to? You know, who is the face of this movement? It hasn't yet emerged. And so I think what we're witnessing is Macron, who described his presidency as a Jupiterian presidency, it's being brought down to earth with a heavy thud.
I think what is really interesting is that if he will become like his predecessors, you know, he just, in the end, had to give in to public pressure and, you know,
I think that Macron
5 seconds, because we don't have time.
Just understand that Macron has to understand there is losers in the system. There is losers in the globalization. And we see the empty France right now that lose with an unfair and sustainable system, and that doesn't understand where they have to go, because that's true when they say president of the rich, no? Well, that's the case. He wants to suppress a lot of taxes for the richest people.
Part of his leadership, for him to actually demonstrate a different kind of leadership for the 21st century rather than going backwards.
Leadership and fairness, both in at the same time, because I think that we are fed up of everybody. We have to be very clear on that. We have to understand you, and we have to make a just transition if you want to make something.
Certainly a very heated up conversation here. After the break, though, football's historic moment marred by a question about twerking. We'll look at how the crowning of the first women's Ballon d'Or winner was overshadowed by sexism. Do stay with us. Welcome back to the program. The Ballon d'Or Awards is football's biggest night, honoring the top players in the world. But this year, the moment Norway's Ada Hegerberg was crowned the world's best female footballer was quickly overshadowed. Alex Morgan in the Cube has more on this story. Alex?
Well, Tessa, let's go back to what Ada Hegerberg herself posted on Instagram. What a night. Because yes, there are complications to this story I will come on to, but for her, this was a huge achievement. Here she is. She's 23 years old, holding the first ever Ballon d'Or given to a woman. The Champs-Élysées in the background, the Arc de Triomphe. It was a huge night for her in Paris and for women's football. And let me tell you why she is such a star. Just look at her track record, her scoreboard. With her team, Olympique Lyonnais, they are 3 times consecutive champions in the Champions League. 3 consecutive titles there. She herself scoring 53 goals last season, and in the Champions League setting a record for the number of goals she has scored. She is just 23. She's originally, of course, from Norway, but has taken on a leading role in Olympique Lyonnais. But that moment where she did receive her award did have a controversial twist when the co-host of the event, Martin Solveig, the French DJ seen here, asked her if she knew how to twerk. Now, at that moment, she seems to look a bit uncomfortable. She steps away a bit before the pair eventually do a couple of dance moves on stage. But people quick to jump on this moment. This question that they're saying, well, did you ask male stars a question like that? Where's the questions about football? And really, some of the top names took offence at this, saying it was unacceptable, including Andy Murray, of course, British tennis star Andy Murray, saying, why do women still have to put up with that? And then a rude word, this on his Instagram story, personally publishing this. You can see how strongly he felt about it, saying, well, what questions did they ask the male stars, like Mbappe, for example? And at the bottom he says, look, to everyone who thinks people are just overreacting or this is a joke, it wasn't. I have been involved in sport my whole life, and the level of sexism, it's unreal. Now, it's a pretty strong message from Andy Murray, echoed throughout the social media sphere. But Martin Solveig, I think, quite quick to notice he had said something wrong. He posted a picture with him and Ada saying, look, I apologised, I meant no offence. Ada accepted that, and indeed to cameras afterwards she said, well, I didn't take it as a sexual, inappropriate comment at the time. But at the end here, look at this line. Most importantly, congratulations to Ada. And that is the message that she wants us to take away. And indeed that we should take away from this. The first female winner of the Ballon d'Or. This, the message from Ada in her acceptance speech, saying, it is important to show young girls that they can believe in themselves, and I hope they are inspired by this. They are the future. A champion, not just of football in, of course, France, but now on the global stage. Ada there wanting us to take that message away, Tessa, not perhaps the comments about twerking.
All right, thank you for that, Alex, and our team in the Cube. And joining me to talk about this, we have Zara Todd in the studio from the European Disability Forum of the Women's Committee. We have the Irish Independent MEP with the ALDE Group, Marianne Harkin. And we also have Jeanne Pont, a parliamentary assistant and the founder of an anti-sexual harassment blog here in the Parliament. I guess, Jeanne, I'll start with you. We've talked before about sexual harassment. You know, a lot of the thing that came out here is it was just a joke and was understood as a joke. How do we put this in context? Is a go-to excuse?
Of course, there are no excuse of sexism, because when you excuse and you give a justification of sexism by saying it's a joke or it's my culture or it's just my age or it's my way of acting, you are making you're making a really bad situation of what is sexism. And sexism is something big, that sexism has also consequences. It's not a normal behaviors. It's not an appropriate behaviors. Sexism is just a fertile ground for sexual harassment and for sexual assault. And this is, of course, really annoying to also have to deal with that, because what will think the young girls that they want to play football and what they want to be involved? It's also coming back to women's body and appearance and not taking us seriously.
Sure.
And this is a huge backlash against women's rights, because the reaction on the social media and saying they overreacted, it's not something important. It's something that is really terrible.
And Marianne, I mean, this is football is a male-dominated industry. So is politics. You've been in it for a while. What is your take on? Has it improved in any way, or are we still 2018 and this is still the same case?
Well, you see, he didn't ask her, could she dance? He asked her, could she twerk? And that was an entirely different question with certain sexual connotations. Let's be clear. Now, he probably thought it was a joke. So what does that tell you? It tells you about mindset. It tells you about how people think. And Andy Murray got it right. The level of sexism in sport is just totally unacceptable. I see it in my own country. So what he thought was a joke, in fact, showed a mindset of how people think. He was using, sexualizing the language he was using. Twerking is very different.
All right, and because another topic that we are following today, we are going to Iceland now, because there are also calls for 6 politicians in Iceland to resign over sexist as well and offensive comments. Now, the opposition MPs were recorded without their knowledge having a conversation at a bar. Well, the conversation included sexually charged language and profanity, and the politicians also mocked a former colleague's disability by imitating the sound of a seal. Now, the recording spread quickly on social media after an anonymous eavesdropper sent it to the media. But despite ongoing protests, more of those involved have resigned. In fact, one MP, a former Prime Minister Gunnlaugsson, took to Facebook to decry the invasion of his privacy. All right, we have heard this story. I think you knew in particular. I'd like to bring up the politician that they were talking about. It is her name is Herda Harald's daughter. She was a former politician. She was a former MP, and she has this condition called brittle bone disease. So Freya, this is the politician they were referring to, who when they were imitating the sound of a seal, I think there, and they said that this was actually they denied that, saying this was the sound of a chair moving. All right, let's talk about this, because you knew Freya personally.
So Freya is a friend of mine, and I've spoken to her since this has happened. One of the things that really annoys her about this is it's being seen solely as a disability mockery, whereas actually for her it was said in the context of other sexist comments. So it is not just about disability, it is also sexism in the extreme, and in this particular instance she has been dehumanised in sexism and disableism. So for her, what has happened is life-changing. She's now a news story. That's not what she existed to do. What is really distressing for her is when people have started to talk to her about what's happened, she has been told that it was because she was annoying people, because she was having a say and being an activist and being a feminist, that she brought attention onto herself, and that is what has caused these politicians to react in this way. So there has been a lot of justification of why these politicians have said this.
And, I think that's one of the justifications that brought up, and that's upsetting Freya. But another that we have to address is the response of the politicians saying, well, look, this was a private conversation. This is like locker room talk, and you don't necessarily mean what you say when you are in that private space. What do you think as a politician? What is the decorum?
If you're a private person, your conversations are private. If you're a public person, it's entirely different. And I mean, when you told me about what other politicians have subsequently said to her, I mean, I almost started to cry. It is horrific to think that because this woman is bringing attention to disability and to feminist issues, that in some way she's a target. I mean, have we lost our reason? And when you think of a country like Iceland that scores so well on many of the gender equality issues, when you're a public person, you're a public person. Yes, there may be an issue about recording somebody in public, but those were the views expressed. I mean, I'm rarely shocked, but I'm shocked by the response of other politicians.
What do you think about that, in not the content of what they said, but their argument of this is an invasion of privacy, and what was said there? It might reflect one opinion, but it was said in a privacy context, private context.
For me, I perfectly share what you just said, because when you have a mandate, when you're elected by citizens, men and women who voted for you, you cannot be any private person. And even though you're a private person, you're an individual, you cannot forget that you have a mandate and you're elected, you're representing a mandate of a society, a government, and there is absolutely no justification. And also because in some work environment and politics, the European Parliament, for example, the boundaries in between what represents work, mission, and what represents private time is really thin. Like when you have delegations going abroad for long times, when you travel with politicians, does it mean that is private life and you can do everything you want? Of course not.
This was said in a public space.
Absolutely.
As a starting point. So it was said in a public space where anyone could have overheard. Freya already experiences discrimination because of how she looks. and because of how people perceive that. Now, for me, the fact that it was politicians saying this makes it worse, because if you choose to hold a public office, there are certain expectations of modelling behaviour for other citizens. So if they have said this, it makes it acceptable for other people to say it.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that Freya has said very clearly, this is not the first time that she's experienced this kind of thing. But these people have power, and it is abuse of power to pick on somebody who has less power than you.
Certainly important issues to be brought
the last
up.
politician that I remember who mocked somebody was Donald Trump during his election.
Right, and we saw that. Indeed, as I'm saying, it's really a sensitive issue to have to bring to light all these issues that we're talking about. All right, after the break on Raw Politics, Denmark's version of Alcatraz, we look at the Danish government's plans to send rejected asylum seekers and foreigners convicted of crimes to a small island. Don't go away. Welcome back to Raw Politics. And Denmark's come up with an original solution to the migration question. It plans to ferry its unwanted foreigners to an isolated island. Foreign criminals and failed asylum seekers unable to return to their home countries will be taken to the island of Lindholm, 7 hectares in size and 3 kilometers from the shore. The island is used for infectious disease research. Inhabitants will still have to sleep there and register every day with authorities. The Danish People's Party celebrated the initiative with a cartoon on its Facebook page. Well, the move comes as the Commission stands to leave behind asylum procedures ahead of European elections in May. And to delve deeper into this, I am joined by Anders Primdahl, who is an MEP with the Danish People's Party, Friends of Europe's Director of Strategy, Dharmendra Kanani, joining us again, and the Sunday Times EU correspondent, Andrew Byrne. All right, I will start with you, Anders. I mean, what is this, basically? Is it pushing the envelope on what is acceptable?
I wouldn't say so. The institution is only for people who have been convicted of criminal offences and have endured long prison sentences in Denmark, and then are subsequently placed there until they can return to their country of origin. So ordinary rejected asylum applicants is still going to be in other facilities. So this is focused in on really...
But is there not something wrong with the idea of ferrying people to an island isolation?
No, I think there's something wrong with the idea to have people who have convicted of very serious crimes like murder, crimes of war, sexual crimes, hard violence, and having them in society when they by a court have been deemed to be sent abroad to their country of origin. I think that's the real problem. And right now we have these institutions in neighborhoods where people actually live and are quite unsafe. So in that sense, I think it's a very good solution to a delicate problem.
All right, what do you think, Dharmendra, of
I was reflecting on this. This year is a year which we commemorated the First World War. Which led also to a second, in which some of the worst crimes of humanity were created. And actually seeing the cartoon and listening to some of the rhetoric coming out of the political party and the foreign minister and home minister, it reminds you of that rhetoric from 100 years ago. And my goodness, we should fear what is taking place. It feels like the moral compass has gone skew-whiff. It's like the genie's out of the bottle and it's anyone's game. You know, Poland and Hungary are doing what they do with asylum seekers and refugees in containers. Now we have Denmark saying it's okay to ferry people onto an island.
But what do you think about Andrew's point that they are convicted of serious crimes?
That does not mean they have no human rights.
Well,
and I think the issue here is actually, regardless of the status of a crime, this is about humanity and humanitarian responses to people.
And just to say that some of the people that are going to be ferried there are asylum seekers, genuine asylum seekers.
Indeed.
Not all of them are convicted. How would you respond to that?
No, everyone is convicted in that centre. I'm sorry if it's not translated rightly.
Some don't have a state, so where do they go? They're stateless. Where would they go?
If you're convicted of these crimes, I really don't see it's a big point that they should wander around.
This is an example of the policy of appearances, the policy of presentation, which the Danish government has become expert at. It's the latest in a long line of comically sadistic policies that show that the government's being tough on asylum seekers. I mean, it's a fair point. If you have people who are suspected as being dangerous individuals, you need to take special measures, fine. But there are convicted Danish criminals who aren't all put on islands. Presumably, you don't have to have a sort of a colourful, faraway island to keep dangerous people or potentially dangerous people under surveillance. It's entirely for public consumption, and this happens each week in Denmark. It's remarkable.
And it's that combination of the imagery and the rhetoric.
I'll give you the last.
It's the combination of the imagery and the rhetoric which leads us to think, actually, we're not learning lessons from the past, but actually, what are you communicating about your values?
All right. Well, this is indeed a divisive topic, as we can see. Now, for tonight's Raw Moment, let's move on. It comes from the COP24 conference in Poland, where one 15-year-old girl's climate activism has got everyone talking. Let's take a look.
There was some youth in the USA that refused to go to school because of the school shootings. And then I was in some kind of a group with several youths that we were going to come up with new projects to do. And then someone said, what if children did that, refused to go to school, but for the climate? And then I thought it was a very good idea, and I thought that hasn't been done before.
And it's very scary that the politicians are not aware of our time's most important question.
All right, that's all we have for you this evening. Thank you for watching Raw Politics tonight, and see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. Good night.